Smoke rose into the gray sky, curling like fading memories above the ruined land. The battlefield had gone quiet. No more sounds of gunfire. No more screams. Only silence. And something else. A faint, soft cry. Human soldier Marcus Hale moved carefully through the wreckage of the alien freighter that had crashed into the forest. His boots crunched over broken metal and burned leaves. His scanner blinked, showing heat signatures buried under the debris. He paused. There it was again, a child's cry. It was weak, but it tugged at something deep inside him. This wasn't a soldier's scream. This was fear. Pain. A call for help. Marcus tightened his grip on his plasma rifle and stepped closer to the half-buried escape pod. The door was jammed, smoke leaking from its sides. A warning light blinked. Low oxygen. He shoved a metal panel aside, ignoring the sharp edges that scraped his glove. "Hello?" he called out, his voice soft. "Is anyone there?" A whimper answered him. Then silence. He dropped to one knee and pulled the last cover free. Inside, curled up and trembling, was a small alien child, no older than 4 human years. She had pale lavender skin and small ridges along her forehead. Her clothes were torn and her eyes were wide with tears. Marcus stared, stunned. He had seen many aliens during the war. Some were hostile, some neutral. But never had he seen a child like this. "It's okay," he said gently, lowering his weapon. "I'm here to help." The child flinched at first, her small hands rising to cover her face. Then something changed. She looked at him. Her crying stopped. Her eyes locked onto his face, studying him carefully. Then slowly she reached out and touched his chest with her tiny fingers. Marcus didn't move. He let her explore. Her touch was light, unsure. Then she did something unexpected. She leaned forward and placed her head against his chest. Marcus's heart ached. "You poor thing," he whispered, wrapping his arms around her carefully. She didn't resist. She simply melted into his embrace like she had been waiting for it. He tapped his communicator. "Command. This is Recon Unit Hale. I found a survivor. A child. Alien species. Alive, but weak." "Copy that, Hale," the voice replied. "Evac. Ship is en route. Hold position." Marcus looked down at the child. Her breathing had slowed. Her eyes were closing. He frowned. "Her vitals are dropping. I think she's losing consciousness. She needs medical attention now." As he lifted her into his arms, something strange happened. A faint glow appeared on her neck, an odd symbol like a curved line with dots around it. It pulsed once, then faded. "What was that?" Marcus whispered. The child murmured something in her language. He didn't understand the words, but they sounded calm, like she was no longer afraid. The evac ship arrived minutes later. Medics rushed to take the girl, but she refused to let go of Marcus. She clung to his shirt, her face hidden against his chest. The moment they tried to take her, she cried again, louder, full of fear. Marcus looked at the medic. "Let me hold her, at least until she calms down." The medic hesitated, then nodded. "All right, soldier, but she needs to get scanned ASAP." Inside the ship, while flying toward the nearest outpost, the girl finally fell asleep in Marcus's arms. He never thought a mission would turn out like this, carrying a small alien child who somehow trusted him more than her own kind. He stared out the window as the stars passed by. His mind raced with questions. Why had she stopped crying the moment she saw him? Why had she reached for him like she knew him? And what was that glowing mark? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary rescue. This child had chosen him, and that choice was going to change everything. The shuttle landed softly on the landing pad at the human outpost, the steady hum of its engines finally dying away. As Marcus stepped out with the child in his arms, he could feel the weight of her trust pressing against his chest. The medics, waiting nearby, rushed forward with their scanners, but the girl only clung to Marcus tighter, her small hands wrapped around his neck. "Let us help her," one of the medics urged gently. Marcus hesitated. The child wasn't hurting, not anymore. But there was something about the bond she had formed with him that felt deeper than simple attachment. "She's not ready to let go of me yet. Just give her a minute." The medic nodded but looked concerned. The girl's skin was pale, her body trembling slightly. Despite her calm demeanor, her condition was delicate. Her pulse was steady but weak. Marcus walked with her to a nearby medical bay, the child still in his arms. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. The walls were lined with medical supplies, but all Marcus could focus on was the girl in his arms, her wide, innocent eyes that never left his face. "Marcus, we need to scan her," one of the doctors said, walking up to them. "We need to know what's wrong before we can help her." "I'll stay with her," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "Just make sure she's comfortable." The doctor sighed, clearly not used to having soldiers be so protective. "Fine, but we're running out of time." The child stirred slightly as the medic approached with a handheld scanner. It beeped, and the girl winced, shifting her head to hide her face against Marcus's chest. "It's okay," Marcus whispered, gently rubbing her back. "I won't let them hurt you." The scanner's lights flickered and the medic frowned. "That's odd. It's not showing anything I can identify. Her biology is different." Marcus's attention snapped to the child's neck, where he noticed the faint symbol that had glowed earlier. It was barely visible now, a small, intricate shape that looked like a series of curves and dots, all connected. Something about it felt important, but Marcus couldn't place why. "Can you check this mark?" he asked, pointing to it. The medic leaned closer. "It's an unknown pattern. I've never seen anything like it. But it's glowing. Faintly, like it's reacting to your presence." Marcus blinked. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," the medic replied. "But when you touch her, the mark gets brighter." Marcus looked at the child, feeling a strange sensation in his chest. She had stopped trembling and was now quietly resting. Her breathing even. He couldn't explain it, but he could feel something, some invisible connection between them, as if her well-being was tied to his own. The room was silent for a long moment, as the doctor tried to scan again. The mark continued to glow faintly, with each touch of Marcus's hand. "She's stable," the medic said after a while. "But we'll need to monitor her closely. Whatever this mark is, it's reacting to you. It's almost like she's connected to you." Marcus frowned. "But I've never seen her before. I didn't even know she existed until a few hours ago." The doctor sighed. "Sometimes the body does things we don't understand. This could be a biological reaction or something more spiritual. But either way, she seems to have formed a bond with you." Marcus felt a chill run through him at the thought. A bond? With an alien child he'd just met? It felt impossible, and yet the way she looked at him, the way she calmed when he touched her, made him think that maybe this was no accident. "Where's her mother?" Marcus asked suddenly. He'd almost forgotten the one who must have been searching for her. "She's on her way," the medic said. "Once the Alliance learns about this situation, they'll want to send someone to retrieve the child. But we'll have to tell them about the mark. This could be something huge, Marcus." Marcus looked down at the child again. She was sleeping peacefully now, her small hand still gripping his sleeve. It was strange. This child, so small, so fragile, seemed to trust him completely. He reached down to adjust the blanket covering her, his fingers brushing against the glowing mark. It flared brighter for a split second, then dimmed again. "You're safe now," he whispered to her, more to reassure himself than her. "I won't let anyone take you until I know what's going on." The door to the medical bay opened then, and a woman stepped inside, a tall, regal figure with silvery skin and dark eyes. Her long hair flowed behind her, and her presence filled the room with a quiet authority. It was clear she was not human. Marcus stood at attention, instinctively placing his hand on the child's shoulder. The alien woman's gaze immediately shifted to the girl in his arms. "I am Valera," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight of command. "I have come for my daughter." The child stirred at the sound of her mother's voice, but her grip on Marcus didn't loosen. She only whimpered faintly. Valira's eyes softened for a moment, then narrowed in concern as she saw her daughter's reaction. She has never done this before. Why won't she come to me? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He didn't have an answer. The child was still clinging to him like a lifeline, and he could feel the unspoken bond between them, a connection neither of them had expected, yet both seemed to be tied to. She trusts me, Marcus said quietly, and I trust her. The air in the room seemed to thicken as Valira, the alien woman, stood in front of Marcus and the child. Her eyes, dark and sharp like polished obsidian, never left her daughter. The tension in the room was palpable, a feeling Marcus hadn't expected in the sterile, neutral space of a medical bay. The child stirred in his arms, but instead of reaching out to the woman, she buried her face further into Marcus's chest. Her small body shook slightly, as if frightened. Marcus held her close, his hand gently brushing her lavender-colored hair. Valira took a step forward, her movements deliberate and graceful. Her gaze flicked between Marcus and the girl, an unreadable expression crossing her face. I am Valira, of the Vrexen Order, she said, her voice a quiet force, and I have come for my daughter. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked down at the child, her tiny fingers still gripping his shirt tightly. Her eyes remained, fixed on him, refusing to meet her mother's gaze. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally, his voice steady. She's not ready to leave yet. I can't just hand her over. Valira's brow furrowed, a flicker of surprise passing through her eyes. She had not expected such resistance, especially not from a human soldier. You have no right to keep her from me, she said coldly. She belongs with her own kind, not with you. Marcus felt the weight of her words. He had always been a soldier, trained to follow orders and protect those in need. But this was different. This child, with her soft cries and her strange connection, to him had become someone he felt a duty to protect. I understand that, Marcus replied, his voice calm but firm. But she trusts me, and right now that's more important than anything else. I can't just give her up. Valira's expression softened, but only slightly. She stepped closer, her eyes now locked on her daughter's face. My daughter has never shown such trust in anyone before. She's always been reserved, always kept a distance, and yet she chose you. Why? Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't have an answer, not a clear one. All he knew was that the moment he had found her, something had shifted. There was a connection, a bond, something more than just duty. He had felt it the moment she stopped crying in his arms and looked at him with those wide, curious eyes. I don't know, he admitted, but she feels safe with me, and I'm not going to let her go until we understand why. Valira studied him for a long moment. Her gaze was intense, like she was searching for something in him, something hidden beneath the surface. Marcus stood tall, trying not to feel uncomfortable under her piercing stare. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Finally, Valira spoke again, her tone no longer as harsh. I do not understand what this means, she said quietly, but I will not take my daughter from you by force. That is not my way. Marcus nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. He had expected a confrontation, maybe even a demand to hand over the child immediately. But Valira seemed different than he had imagined. There was no anger in her voice, only uncertainty. The child shifted slightly in Marcus's arms, her grip loosening as she looked up at Valira. The woman's face softened and she knelt down slowly, bringing herself to the child's level. The girl's big eyes met her mother's, but instead of running to her, she simply tilted her head, her expression one of confusion. Nara, Valira called gently, her voice filled with a warmth that Marcus hadn't heard before. It's me, your mother. Come to me, my little one. But the child didn't move. She stayed close to Marcus, her small hands now gripping his sleeve. There was a whimper, a small sound of distress. Marcus felt his heart ache. He looked down at the child, her wide eyes filled with uncertainty. her body trembling slightly. She had been through so much. The crash, the loss, and now this. The arrival of her mother, a figure who seemed so distant to her. "Hey, it's okay," Marcus whispered softly. "I'm here. You don't have to go if you don't want to." He felt the girl relax in his arms, her tiny body pressing closer to him as if drawing comfort from his presence. Valira, watching them, seemed to understand. Her eyes softened further, and she rose to her feet slowly. "I can see she is not ready," Valira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps I was wrong to expect her to come to me immediately. She is still frightened." Marcus didn't know what to say. This alien woman, who had once been a figure of authority, now seemed almost vulnerable. Her daughter, the one she had spent years protecting, was clearly not ready to accept her just yet. "I think she needs time," Marcus said gently. "Time to heal, to understand what's happening. She's been through a lot, and I don't think she's ready to trust anyone except me right now." Valira nodded, her gaze lingering on the child. "I will not force her, but I will stay close. She is my daughter. I cannot abandon her." Marcus nodded, understanding now that they were both in a strange, delicate place. He could feel the pull of responsibility toward the child, toward Valira, and toward the peace that might be waiting if they could somehow bridge the gap between them. "I'll make sure she's safe," Marcus promised. For a moment, neither of them spoke, both lost in their own thoughts. The hum of the outpost, the quiet beeping of the medical equipment, filled the silence. Finally, Valira turned to leave. "I will wait outside. When she is ready, I will be here. You have my word." As she exited, Marcus looked down at the child, in his arms. Her grip had loosened, but she was still clinging to him, her tiny face now resting against his chest. "I don't know what's going to happen, little one," Marcus whispered, his voice barely a breath. "But I won't let anyone hurt you. Not now, not ever." And with that promise, Marcus knew that this strange bond, this unexpected connection, was just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. The next few days passed quietly, the air between Marcus, the child, and Valira thick with unspoken words. The outpost had become a strange mixture of routine and uncertainty. The child, whom Marcus had named Nara in the absence of any other name, remained close to him, hardly letting go for even a moment. He couldn't explain it, but there was a bond between them that neither words nor distance could break. Each morning, Marcus would wake up to find Nara curled up beside him, her small form snug in the corner of his bunk. She had become a fixture in his life, her soft presence a constant reminder of how quickly the world could change. Valira, too, was always near. She hadn't left the outpost, though she kept a respectful distance. Every day she would visit the medical bay, checking on her daughter from afar. Sometimes she would speak with the scientists, seeking answers to things they couldn't explain. Yet no matter how many tests they ran, no one could explain the glowing mark on Nara's neck or the way her vitals responded to Marcus's presence. Marcus had tried to make sense of it all. He wasn't a scientist, and he had no idea what kind of bond he shared with the alien child. All he knew was that Nara trusted him, and that trust was something he couldn't take lightly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Marcus sat on the balcony of the outpost, gazing out into the vastness of space. Nara sat beside him, her tiny hands resting in her lap, her eyes wide as she stared at the stars. For the first time since he'd found her, she didn't look frightened. She looked curious, at peace. Valira, standing in the doorway, watched them quietly. She hadn't said anything in hours, but the way her eyes softened as she observed Marcus and her daughter spoke volumes. There was no anger now, no urgency, only an understanding that they were all in this together, whether they liked it or not. Marcus turned to face her, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. "She's doing better," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Valira gave a slight nod in return. "I see that," The silence between them was thick, neither knowing what to say. For a moment, they were two strangers, brought together by fate and circumstance, bound by the strange, inexplicable connection between Marcus and Nara. "You know," Marcus said after a long pause, "I never expected any of this. I'm just a soldier following orders. But this feels different." Valera took a step closer, her gaze flicking between Marcus and Nara. "I understand. My daughter, she's always been difficult to reach. She's never shown affection like this before. Not even toward me." Marcus looked at Nara, who was now looking up at the stars with a small smile on her face. "I don't know why she trusts me, but I can't just turn my back on that." Valera's eyes softened. "I never intended to turn her away from you, but I must admit I don't fully understand what's happening. I can't help but wonder if something more is at play here. Perhaps this bond isn't just the result of an accident." Marcus turned his head to look at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "There's an ancient legend among my people," Valera began, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "A story passed down from generation to generation. It speaks of a guardian, someone from another world who would come when the time was right. This guardian would protect our kind in times of great need." Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. The way Valera spoke with such conviction made it sound like she truly believed in the story. "Are you saying that I'm this guardian?" Valera's gaze met his, and for the first time, Marcus saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know. But the way Nara reacts to you, the way she clings to you, it is as if you've been chosen by something greater than both of us." Marcus didn't know what to say. The thought of being a chosen one seemed ridiculous to him. He was just a regular soldier, a man who had seen too much of the darkness of war. He wasn't some hero from a storybook. But Nara's trust in him was undeniable. And if she was truly connected to something greater, then perhaps he was meant to play a role in whatever that was. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. "I'm not a hero, Valera. I'm just a soldier who wants to do the right thing, and right now that means protecting Nara." Valera was silent for a moment before she spoke again, her voice tinged with a softness that Marcus hadn't heard before. "Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps the role of the protector doesn't require grand titles or destiny. Maybe it simply requires someone who is willing to care." Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Maybe Valera was right. Maybe the real purpose wasn't about being chosen for some grand, mythical destiny. Maybe it was just about being there when someone needed you most. The moment was interrupted by a soft voice. "Marcus?" Nara had shifted in her seat, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. Her hand reached out toward him, and without thinking, he took it, feeling the warmth of her tiny fingers in his. Valera watched them, her expression unreadable. She seemed to understand now. Nara's bond with Marcus wasn't just a fluke, it was something deeper, something that tied them together. "I think she's ready," Marcus said quietly, his eyes meeting Valera's. "She's ready to be with you?" Valera nodded, her gaze softening as she walked over to where Nara sat. Slowly, she knelt down beside her, her hand reaching out to gently stroke the child's hair. Nara didn't pull away, but instead she looked at Valera with something new. Curiosity, perhaps even a glimmer of recognition. Valera's voice was low, almost a whisper. "It's all right, my little one. I'm here." And for the first time, Nara didn't look scared. She didn't look uncertain. She simply looked at her mother, and then slowly, she reached up and touched her face. The days following Nara's tentative acceptance of her mother, Valera, were filled with a new kind of tension. Marcus had been right about one thing. Nara had trusted him first, and that trust couldn't be easily replaced by her biological mother. Yet there was something undeniably different now. It wasn't that Nara had forgotten Marcus. It was more that she had found a balance between the two of them. She still sought comfort from him, but she also seemed to be slowly opening up to Valera in a way she hadn't before. For Valera, the experience was strange. She had never imagined her daughter would be so distant from her, especially after all they had been through together. And yet, it wasn't just the child's attachment to Marcus that puzzled her. It was the bond she could see forming between the human soldier and her daughter. Sitting in the outpost's small dining area, Valeria stared at the wall, her thoughts far away. Marcus entered with Nara in his arms, the child resting against his shoulder, her small body curled up like she had just woken from a long nap. Her eyes flicked briefly to Valeria before they returned to Marcus's chest, her hands gripping his uniform as if she never wanted to let go. "She's been quiet all day," Marcus said softly as he set Nara down in one of the chairs. "Too quiet even for her. I think something's bothering her." Valeria turned to look at her daughter. Nara's gaze was distant, her usual energy subdued. It was clear that something was weighing on her, though Marcus and Valeria couldn't figure out what. "I'm not sure what's wrong," Valeria admitted. "She hasn't been herself since the crash. The trauma has affected her more than I realized." Marcus sat down beside Nara, his presence an anchor she couldn't resist. She looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with a sadness that didn't belong in a child so young. The glow from the mark on her neck was still faint but steady, responding whenever Marcus was near, as if reassuring both of them that their connection wasn't just in their minds. "Trauma," Marcus said, his voice soft with understanding. "It's hard to bounce back from something like that. We both know that." Valeria nodded, looking at Marcus with a new sense of respect. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a person who understood pain. She could see it in the way he looked after her daughter, as if he knew how fragile this moment was, how easily it could all fall apart. She had been so focused on what had happened to her, on her mission to protect Nara, that she had neglected to consider how the child was feeling, how much she had lost in such a short time. "I've been so focused on the mission," Valeria continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I've ignored the truth. Nara, she's not just my daughter. She's a part of something bigger, something I never thought I would have to explain to her." Marcus raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Valeria's expression shifted, becoming more serious. She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. "The attack on our ship, Marcus. It wasn't just a random raid. We were targeted. Someone knew we were coming. Someone inside my faction wanted us dead. Nara was supposed to die with me." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Your own people?" Valeria's face hardened. "Yes, my own people. But the betrayal was only the surface of what's going on. The mark on Nara's neck. The one you've seen, that's not just some random symbol, it's an ancient sign, a sign of a chosen one." "A chosen one?" Marcus repeated, feeling the weight of the words settle into his chest. Valeria's eyes narrowed, the fire in them burning with a mix of anger and fear. "It's a story passed down for generations in my culture. There is a legend that speaks of a child who would be born with this mark, a child who would bring peace or destruction, depending on who controlled them. And the moment Nara was born, the mark appeared." Marcus sat back, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. "So Nara's not just an ordinary child." "No," Valeria said, her voice full of quiet intensity. "She is not. And that is why they wanted to kill her. They knew that if the mark was allowed to grow stronger, it would lead to a new era for our people. A powerful era." Marcus's mind raced. He had always been a soldier, used to dealing with missions, orders, and the raw realities of conflict. But now it felt like he was caught in something much bigger, something far beyond the simple military objectives he had been trained to handle. "What does that mean for her?" Marcus asked softly, his voice tinged with concern. "For Nara?" Valeria closed her eyes, her face softening with a sadness that Marcus could feel in his chest. "I don't know. It's why I had to flee with her. The mark is growing stronger. It is reacting to something. And now, it seems to have attached itself to you. I can feel it too, the way the mark responds when you are near her." Marcus swallowed hard. "So what does that mean for me?" Valeria's gaze met his, and for the first time Marcus saw vulnerability in her eyes. It means you might be part of the legend. It means you might be the protector who is destined to help her, or be part of the forces who wish to control her. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the weight of the words pressing down on him. He had thought his mission was to protect this child for a few days, maybe a week. He hadn't realized that he had stepped into something that could change the entire course of history. Then what do we do now? Marcus asked, his voice quiet but firm. Valira looked at her daughter, who was now resting against Marcus, her eyes closed, her breathing even. Now we wait. We keep her safe. And we try to figure out who is still hunting us, because I know this isn't over. Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening. Then we'll protect her. I won't let anyone hurt her. Valira's eyes softened. I believe you. And for the first time, Marcus felt like he understood the weight of the path they were on. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something bigger, something that would determine the fate of more than just Nara, but perhaps the entire galaxy. The outpost had been unusually quiet for the past few days. The hum of the engines, the soft beeping of machines, everything seemed to slow down as Marcus, Valira, and Nara settled into a strange, uneasy routine. It was as though the calm before a storm had descended upon them, and they were waiting, uncertain of what was coming next. Marcus could feel it. The tension in the air, the uneasy glances from the other soldiers as they passed by, the whispers that were starting to spread, even though no one said anything directly. It was only a matter of time before the higher-ups would take notice of the situation and intervene. He wasn't wrong. The sudden sound of the door opening brought his attention to the room, and he turned to see a high-ranking officer from the Alliance standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed guards. The officer's face was stern, his posture rigid as he stepped inside, his boots echoing on the floor. Major Callum, Marcus said, standing up to face the officer. He could already sense what was coming. Recon Unit Hale, Major Callum replied, his voice flat. I have orders from command. You're to hand over the alien child immediately. Marcus's heart sank. The words were like a punch to the stomach. He knew this was coming. He had been preparing for it, but hearing it said out loud felt like something breaking deep inside him. What do you mean? Hand her over, Marcus demanded, his voice rising. He glanced at Nara, who was sitting quietly on the couch nearby, her small fingers wrapped around the edge of her blanket. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion, sensing the change in the air. She's not a weapon, Marcus continued, his voice soft but firm. She's just a child who trusts me. Major Callum's eyes flicked to Nara, his gaze cold and calculating. I don't care if she's a child or not, you know the rules. She's a potential threat. We need to study her. She could be a weapon or worse. We can't take risks. Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. I won't let you take her. You don't have a choice, Callum said, his tone becoming more forceful. This is an order from command. The Alliance cannot allow such power to go unchecked. Hand her over now and no one wang. I'll get hurt. The word stung. Marcus had never liked following orders, but he had always done his duty, had always understood the need for control. But this was different. Nara was not a piece of equipment to be studied, and she was certainly not a weapon to be controlled. She's not yours to control. Marcus's voice broke through the silence, shaking with emotion. She's just a little girl. You're not going to turn her into a test subject, not on my watch. Major Callum's eyes hardened. You're defying a direct order, Hale. I don't care, Marcus replied, his voice firm. This isn't just about orders. This is about doing what's right. Callum took a step forward, his voice low and threatening. You're walking a dangerous line, soldier. You have no idea what you're dealing with. We have no choice but to separate you from the child for the greater good. At that moment, Nara stood up, her small frame trembling as she took a step toward Marcus. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus immediately dropped to his knees, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. No, Nara. It's okay, he said softly, his voice full of reassurance, even though his heart was racing. They won't take you. But the child's expression, was something Marcus had never seen before. It wasn't just fear, it was something more, something that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. Her eyes flicked to Major Callum and then back to Marcus, her small hands reaching out for him. The mark on her neck glowed faintly, its pulsating light growing stronger as she moved closer to him, as if the bond between them was somehow amplifying her fear. Major Callum noticed the glow and stepped back slightly, his eyes narrowing. "This is exactly why we can't let you keep her," he said, his voice now tinged with a hint of something darker. "We can't risk that kind of power." Marcus could feel the weight of the officer's words, but all he could focus on was the child in front of him. He couldn't let them take her. He had promised to protect her, and he wasn't going to break that promise, not now, not ever. "No," Marcus said firmly, standing up to face Callum. "You're not taking her." Callum's lips twisted into a sneer. "This is a matter of national security, Hale. You don't have the authority to make that decision. If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to take you into custody as well." Marcus stood his ground, the tension in the room thickening with every word. He had no authority in this situation. He knew that. But he also knew one thing. He couldn't back down. The moment stretched on in silence, the weight of the decision hanging between them. Nara's small hand reached for Marcus's, her grip tight as she looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. "I won't let them take you, Nara," Marcus whispered, his voice a promise. Callum seemed to realize that there was nothing more to say. He turned to his guards and gave a brief nod. The guards stepped forward, their hands on the handles of their weapons. But before they could take another step, the sound of another voice stopped them. "Hold it, Major." It was Valeera. She stood in the doorway, her presence like a force of nature. Her eyes, normally full of calm and control, were now filled with the kind of intensity that sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. "I will not let you take her," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "I will not let you separate me from my daughter." Callum turned toward Valeera, his face a mask of annoyance. "You don't have any say in this, Valeera. This is a military matter, and you're not in a position to interfere." "I disagree," Valeera replied, her voice unwavering. "You will not take her, and you will not force Marcus to hand her over." The room fell into silence once again, and Marcus could feel the shift in the air. Valeera's words were more than just defiance. They were a declaration. She was standing between him and the soldiers, between Nara and the order that threatened to tear them apart. The silence in the room stretched on, thick with tension. Major Callum stood still, his eyes locked on Valeera. She hadn't moved an inch, her expression one of fierce determination. Marcus could feel the weight of her words, the promise of protection in her stance. For a moment, the soldiers and officers in the room seemed frozen, unsure of what to do next. Finally, Major Callum broke the silence, his voice cold and measured. "You're making a mistake, Valeera. You've chosen the wrong side in this. The Alliance will not tolerate this kind of defiance." Valeera didn't flinch. "I'm not choosing sides, Major. I'm choosing my daughter. You will not take her from me." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, but they didn't move to arrest her. The threat in Valeera's voice was clear. She wasn't going to back down. Marcus, still holding Nara's hand, could feel the child's small fingers tightening around his. He looked down at her, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. It was as if the child understood the weight of the situation, though she didn't fully grasp its meaning. She had grown so much in the time they had spent together. It was like she had always been a part of his life, even though they had only met days ago. Marcus knelt down to her level, brushing her hair back from her face. "It's going to be okay, Nara, you're safe," he whispered. The soft glow of the mark on her neck flickered, responding to his words. Valeera, still standing her ground, finally turned her gaze away from Callum and walked toward Marcus and Nara. Her steps were measured but confident. When she reached them, she crouched down beside Marcus, her eyes softening as she looked at her daughter. "We're not going anywhere," Valeera said gently, placing a hand on Nara's shoulder. "You're safe with us, no one will hurt you." Nara looked up at her mother, and for a brief moment, Marcus saw a flicker of recognition in the child's eyes. It was as though she was beginning to understand what her mother was saying, understanding that she wasn't alone anymore. It was a small but important shift. Valira smiled faintly, the first real smile Marcus had seen on her face since they met. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that she wasn't going to let anyone tear them apart. Major Callum sighed, his frustration evident. He stepped back slightly, as if realizing that there was little more he could do without escalating the situation. His hands twitched at his sides, but he didn't reach for his weapon. Instead, he gave a curt nod to the soldiers standing behind him. "Let's go," Callum muttered, his voice laced with irritation. "We'll report this to command." The soldiers, still hesitant, slowly turned and began to exit the room, leaving Marcus, Valira, and Nara alone. The door slid shut behind them, and the heavy silence that followed was more peaceful than it had been in days. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He looked at Valira, who stood up straight, her posture relaxed, but still strong. Her eyes met his, and for the first time there was no tension between them, only an understanding. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for standing with me, with Nara." Valira nodded. "I couldn't let them take her. She's my daughter. She deserves better than to be treated like some object to be studied." Marcus looked down at Nara, who was now resting her head against his shoulder. Her tiny body was relaxed, her breathing slow and steady. She seemed at peace for the first time in days. "We both want what's best for her," Marcus said softly. "But I think we're going to have to be careful. There are people out there who will stop at nothing to get her." Valira's expression darkened slightly. "I know, and I won't let them. But I can't do this alone." Marcus looked up at her, meeting her eyes. "You're not alone anymore. We'll protect her, together." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The quiet of the room seemed to hold a new weight, one that carried a promise of something bigger, something more important than the immediate threat of separation. They were no longer just two individuals brought together by chance. They were a team bound by the unspoken understanding that they had to protect Nara, no matter what. Valira looked down at Nara and smiled again, her expression softening. "She's so much like her father," she murmured, almost to herself. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Her father?" Valira nodded, her eyes distant for a moment as if lost in a memory. "Yes, he was a good man, a protector. He would have wanted Nara to be safe, to grow up free from the chaos we've seen." Marcus felt a pang of sympathy. Valira's life hadn't been easy, and neither had Nara's. The child had lost so much already, and now she was caught in the middle of something far bigger than anyone had ever expected. But despite the challenges, there was hope, and that was something worth fighting for. "She will be safe with us," Marcus said firmly. "We won't let her become part of some war or conflict, not if we can help it." Valira smiled faintly, the weight of the situation still heavy in her eyes, but there was a glimmer of hope there too. "Thank you, Marcus. I think she's found something special in you, something I didn't expect." Marcus smiled back, but it was a quiet, uncertain smile. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I know one thing. I'm not going anywhere. Neither is Nara. We're all in this together." The words felt true. For the first time since he had met Valira and Nara, Marcus finally felt like he understood the gravity of their situation. They weren't just running from danger anymore. They were choosing a new path, a path where they could protect the future, where Nara could grow up in peace, and no matter what came next, they would face it together.